Elicit now has a new interface for its Plus members. So if you are interested in Elicit, I will have a link in the description below. But what they now have is Elicit Notebooks, which allows you to do multiple different steps of your research process within a single page and actually be able to combine together from different steps. So when you go to Elicit now, you will come to this Add Notebook page. So we can add a notebook title. So I'm going to call this Steroids and Ion Mobility Research. So if I'm just getting started in my field and I'm wanting to go through how to find the papers relevant to my field and start getting some of that basic information of what's been done, I can start with this Find Papers methods. And so what I can do is I can type in my research question and I'm going to get papers just like how Elicit would normally work. So I'm going to start with, how are steroids analyzed by ion mobility? And I can go ahead and press the arrow. Now you can see that this is going to cost me some credits. Anytime I am doing any of these three different things, it will cost me credits to use. So now we can see that I have the kind of the same output you would normally expect from Elicit. So you have the summary of the top 8 papers, you have the different papers that it gives, 8 specific papers that it gives, and then you can always add in the new columns that you may want to add in, recognizing that it will cost you credits to add additional columns. You can see generally what this paper is about, including the title here, all of the title information, and then the abstract summary there. And I can always export this. Again, you do have to have the Plus membership to be able to export a bib, a CSV, or an RIS file. And we can add filters here as well. But what is different with the notebooks is now this is one step in the sequence. So now I can collapse this step and just see the step here, or I can expand it. And if I have it collapsed, you can see I have this add a new step. Even with it expanded, you can scroll all the way down and have add a new step. So what I can do now is I can ask multiple different questions. So let's see what the different areas are here. So if I add a new step, we have those same 3 steps that we had at the beginning of our notebook. We can ask a new question and find papers. We can extract data from uploaded papers. We can get a list of concepts. But then if we select papers, we get 3 additional steps that we can do. So we can create a new table from selected papers. That does not cost any credits here. We can summarize abstracts for selected papers. You can see that that does cost credits. It's kind of lower. And then we can chat with papers as well. So right now I'm going to go ahead and ask a new question. So what you might want to do is if you have several different ways you would ask questions or several different parts of your research field that you may be interested in, you can ask a question specific to each of those because you're going to get about 8 results for each of those. So I'm going to ask a new question. So I'm going to ask, what methods are used in ion mobility to separate steroid isomers? So how are steroids analyzed by ion mobility is very large. This is going to be a little bit of a more niche statement to make. So you can see I get my summary again, and you can see that now all of these are more specific to the separation of steroid isomers instead of just being general analysis of steroids altogether. If I come up here, we are going to have some overlap. So like this is a major review. This one's the same here. This one here is specific to only this question. It's not in both. This one as well, because it's not specific to separation of isomers. So you get about half of them are the same between those 2 statements. So that's one of the scenarios where you may be starting really with a really broad question and then you get in more narrow and more narrow. And I can also load more papers into these. So if I wanted to load more papers into the more broad one, I can click this load papers. And then I'm going to get more and more different papers that are related to it. You can see most of these aren't actually relative to separation of steroids using ion mobility. They are more relative to like other types of analytical methods even. So that's one way of going from having a broad concept to being able to get to a more narrow concept. Another thing you may do is you may be working at an intersection of different topics. So for example, my work was typically at the intersection of like biology, ion mobility, mass spectrometry, and chromatography. And so you may actually analyze each aspect by itself. So the first one I'm doing steroids by ion mobility. If I add a step, ask new question. So I'm going to say, how is mass spectrometry used for the analysis of steroids? And I'm going to run that. So at first we're talking about ion mobility. Now we're moving into a different technique such as mass spectrometry. So we're getting our summary again up here. And then we have very different papers that are coming up in our results. Mass spectrometry for steroids. These are kind of reviews. This is probably also a review. In fact, a lot of these are probably reviews because this is a much broader topic, whereas I think my review is the only review in like steroids by mobility. So this is LC tandem MS. So we're getting a lot broader in this case, and you can see we're getting some far older papers. We're talking like some in the 1900s, whereas up here, these were far newer papers. These are all kind of probably 2010 and beyond. Oh, we got one 1975, but that was in the Load More. Yeah, so in the Lord Moore, we got a few longer ones, and this one, these are probably all 2010 and beyond. Yeah, they are. So we're now looking at kind of different aspects, and we can, of course, filter this as well using these filters here. But now we have kind of our 3 different questions here. And now with Elicit Notebooks, we can actually combine papers from these different searches to be able to do things with them. So if we come in here, I'm going to specifically look at papers that are more specific to ion mobility or let's say, or tandem mass spectrometry. So we're going to add in, those aren't really what I'm interested in. Okay, let's select those from this one. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to add a few other ones. Select that one and this one. So now we have 8 papers selected. So when I click add a new step, you can see I get these are no longer grayed out. So I can create a new table from selected papers. I can summarize abstracts or I can chat with these papers. So now, even though these aren't within the same question up here, so this summary of 8 papers, this is specific only to the papers it delivered here. But what if I want a summary of these new 8 papers? So I can come down here and get summarize abstracts for selected papers. And so you can see here, this summarized papers, it has recent advancements in the analysis of steroids has shown promise. IMS has emerged as a powerful tool and it's combining these together. So this is now delivering something that's different than any of these would have delivered because now I've specifically chosen the papers related to a specific topic. So once I did that, you can see it did remove my paper selections. I think this is one feature I would like it to keep is I'd like to be able to do multiple things at once without having to go back and reselect the papers that I selected. So let's come into this one. We're gonna let's pick those 2 and let's get the steroid analysis. So these are all kind of review articles, it looks like. So we're gonna add a step and we're gonna say, create a new table from papers. So now we have these kind of review articles here, and then we can add in new columns here. So each of these are going to cost kind of credit. So this may not make sense for review papers, but this allows us to create new tables of specifically the papers that we wanted. So if we took a couple different questions to get all the papers that we wanted, we could then generate a new table from those papers. Now, one thing that I would also like to do is I'd like to be able to add a title to these kind of steps here. I think up here, the title makes sense to be the question, but summarized papers, if I generated multiple different summaries, I would like to be able to know that this is my one for ion mobility. This is my one for mass spectrometry, or the different reasons I selected the papers, and the same things with the table as well. So let's select those couple again, those reviews. And I'm going to do a new step and I'm going to test their chat with papers. So now I can ask a question and this says use full text. So this is when the full text is turned on, it'll be slower, it'll cost more credits. If not, it's just going to use the abstract. So that is one thing that you are going to be, this isn't the same thing as like uploading your PDF and chatting with your PDF. That is a step you can take, but with this specifically, you can ask a question and it'll give you a specific response from it. If the full text is available, then it may actually pull from the full text there. So what I'm going to chat with is actually really not asking what is in the specific papers themselves, but from these 3 papers, can you tell me what the future work in steroids analysis should be? And then I can press enter. So it gave me a pretty in-depth answer here. It says the future work in steroid analysis as suggested by this review. So it's saying it's only coming from this review. should focus on several key areas to overcome existing challenge and leverage the potential of ion mobility and mass spectrometry techniques. So it's giving us 6 different areas. And I think that this did pull the full text here. I know the full text of this review is online, and some of this is like very specific to what I said in like the conclusion of the paper. So I think this did pull the full text. So this is standalone IMS analysis of steroid mixtures. This was already done within that review there. So I'm a little surprised it's pulling it as future research. I guess it's saying future research could explore the development and optimization of IMS methods that can confidently analyze, because from this review, you couldn't do that yet. High throughput LC-IMS-MS workflow. This, using CCSs to increase identification, be able to process large samples. Enhanced resolution for steroid isomers. That's kind of always a technique that's been used. Future research should work on novel IMS techniques, derivatization method, and the use of different ionization agents or metal adducts to improve resolution of closely related steroid isomers. And it includes multimer formation. So these are all good ways of attempting to accomplish this research. Application to biological samples. This is something that hasn't really been made as much, and that's what it's saying here. Quantitative analysis and validation. That's another good point. Just because you can measure something doesn't mean you can accurately quantitatively measure something. And then integration with bioinformatics tools. I might have included that in my results. I don't remember specifically, but that is a good point in that steroids are often not the most common molecules in these informatics tools. So being able to integrate it. So honestly, I actually think this is really good for giving some future work. I think you would have to analyze if this is still current. Obviously, that was published in 2020. It's 2024 now. It may not be current to date, but if I was sitting here trying to learn a new field and trying to figure out, okay, what should my next research project be? I think this absolutely gives great ideas to start building upon. And if you do have a research idea or you have several research ideas, or you can't find a research idea at all, and you're trying to actually build out a research project or plan, I really recommend downloading my 30-day research jumpstart guide. It's a free PDF that you can use. It walks you through how to go from like not knowing your field at all the way to being able to have a research project and a research plan and an idea that can be publishable. And I think this is one of the steps whenever you're trying to find that idea. This is actually a pretty good way to be able to get that data. Now, it is using a decent amount of credits to be able to do this. So you would want to be on the plus plan definitely before even considering being able to do this. So now what I do like here is this chat with papers. What is the current future work? So it did take my question that I asked and put it in here, and I can continue chatting here. So this is now set to these 3 papers, and I can continue chatting with those 3 specific papers within this step. What I would like again is if I could add something in here to be able to get, sure, this can stay make new table with papers, but then let me put a title here so that I know what's happening. So another option you do have, if I add a step, you can do get a list of concepts. And this is a heavy credit usage. This costs 500 to 2,500 credits. So if you use the link in the description below, you'll get 5,000 credits to start with. This may even use a whole half of your credits. I'm going to do this to show you what it's going to do. So I'm going to ask for 3 different concepts. So the different types of ion mobility, the methods used, and the steroids used to separate steroid isomers by ion mobility spectrometry. So this is the steps that it goes through. It finds papers. It found 65 concepts and 34 papers, and then it found 21 unique concepts. And it gives a final answer here. So here we're getting a lot of different types of information, and probably should have rephrased my question to be a lot simpler looking at what it's giving. So like formation of multimers for IMS, I do like that it's actually giving like specific quotes from papers. I think that's a really good, a lot of AI tools aren't giving specific quotes, so I really like that. Analysis of different metal cations, host-guest complex formation, steroid isomer separation by ion mobility. That's really just the initial statement. Standalone IMS. A lot of these are really duplicates of each other. unfortunately. So if I scroll down, I actually see the steroid isomer separation methods. And this is actually probably where I wish it would have taken this and broken this out. I don't think that overall this is super helpful because it is just so broad. So we really want to be very specific in our question. So I'm going to ask instead, what ion mobility spectrometry techniques have been used to enhance the separation of steroid isomers? Okay, so from this one, we found 5 unique concepts. So it's SLIM, ion mobility techniques, field ion spectrometry, which it didn't even generate an answer there, steroid isomer separation techniques and ion mobility. And this looks like the exact same thing it gave me as above. Just a lot of results, and then tandem TIM. So I was hoping it was going to give me more of the derivatization, multimer formation, group 1 metal adducts, those things. With this, it's really just giving me a few different types of ion mobility spectrometry. So I think my field may not be as good for using something like this. I think if you had a more simpler field, or if you were looking at, like, for example, one of their examples was like treatments for hair loss, I think that would be a little bit easier of a concept for it to grasp as a large language model. I think for my specific field, and as you get more and more in the weeds of a field, I think it's going to be harder for this to work. If you were to ask what analysis techniques have been used on steroids, I think it probably would have been like LC, IMS, mass spec. And you may need to ask more of the broader questions of this. So overall, this entire notebook has cost me around 1,500 credits. So everything I've ran in this has cost me about 1,500 credits, if that gives you a reasonable estimate of how much credits this is going to use to go through all of this. Now, the other thing I would like is if you can download a CSV here of this information, but one thing I dislike, especially with how high credit intensive this is, I would like to be able to select these papers to be able to do follow-up analysis on. Like if I was really interested in a couple of these papers, it does have a link here and you can open the paper, but you can't select the paper to keep running like a new step on it. You would have to do a find the research article or something like that. The other option that I'm not going to get into a ton today is you can extract data from uploaded papers. So if you got like this and then you wanted to extract a bunch of data from a paper, you could go find all of those PDFs and then add a new step and extract data from an uploaded paper. You could upload your papers here. I can like choose this one to analyze and go ahead and do that. And so now with this one in here, I can add in the different columns that I need for it. So if I added in the main findings, and so you can see that the main findings are now here. So if you had all of these papers and you don't want to, even if you created a new table, if you wanted to get really the deep information from the PDFs in a table format, then what you can do is go find all the PDFs, upload them into your Elicit, and then extract the data and keep it on the same stream. The one thing, again, I would like for this is the ability to put a title here so that I know when it's all collapsed, what is this versus this make new table. And then you always have the option to like export any of these CSVs. So the other component of this, if you have a really, really long notebook that you're working through, is you can always come over here and see your table of contents here and be able to go to any of them and expand them out and have all of this information in a single place, which I do think is really nice versus having like 3 different things where you're going all over the place and then now being able to generate new summaries and new tables from a list of papers so that you're not spending as many credits. Like if I added a column to each of these 3 when I'm only interested in a certain number of the articles for a given column, then it doesn't really make sense to do that. This is one way to be able to manage your credits a little bit better, but also to be able to allow your research to continue on more quickly. I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.